Hi, my name is Dan Zeilinger, and I have been a world-traveling trad jazz musician for the past 40 years. Some of my most memorable performances were on the lawn of the Edinburgh Castle, at Imperial Palace in Japan, as well as TV shows and commercials around the world. I've met many people during my career, and have spent many hours on stage on and off with these musicians talking about jazz, life, and more. Some are touring musicians, some are theme park warriors, and some are casual musicians who play on weekends with their friends. I think they all have stories worthy of a movie script. And through these interviews, I'll be sharing them with
Hi,
you.
Chet.
So,
I hope you know
Dan,
the world has been wanting me to interview you, for about a month and a half, and I've been trying to get up the gumption to figure out a way to get it done. And thank you, Dawn.
You're welcome.
Hi, Chet. So you haven't seen
hi,
any?
Dan.
You haven't seen this format at all, then yet?
No.
Oh, it's actually a TV show. It's on YouTube.
Okay.
That where I've interviewed people who play traditional jazz in Dixieland. I've done over 60 interviews already of people you know.
Good heavens.
Everybody.
Probably.
So just so that would be
The sound keeps cutting out.
the connection is a little strange.
Sound keeps cutting.
He says my sound.
No. Don't.
Make sure that the laptop is charged. How's that? Is that any better?
He looks frozen at the moment. Just wait a second.
Right now, your picture is frozen. If you can hear me. Oh, okay, lost.
Okay, that might be better.
All right. Is that better, Chet?
Yeah. Could I talk just a little bit about when I helped found SBDJ in 1960?
Absolutely. I'm going to talk about your entire life, actually. What I do.
Heavens, that is 96 years.
I know. What I do with these interviews is I take people back to where they were born, and we talk all the way through their careers and their musical experiences, and the starting of SPDJ, and the fact that you started Night Blooming Jazzmen when you started it, and the fact that you moved to Claremont from New Orleans in '37. So you've been around a while in that area, haven't you?
31.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I moved here in 31.
Yeah, from New
We
Orleans.
moved to Claremont in 1931.
Okay.
Yeah, not 7.
But you were born in Columbia, Missouri, right?
Right. Yeah, my dad was working on his doctorate, and my mom and dad had a boarding house where they put up graduate students to keep things going, a little money coming in. And so my mom played the piano, my dad played the banjo. And so they used to play Saturday night gigs and fraternity parties and so forth. So I was hearing jazz before I was born.
My word. But you didn't actually start playing until 37.
That's about right, yeah. I
I
got my first horn when I was about 10, yeah. So that would have been 34, but close enough.
So you started doing
Put
school?
my first jazz band together when I was a junior in high school. I put a band together, and we played a couple of assemblies at the high school, and we played Basin Street Blues and Dark John Sutter's Ball and stuff like that.
Now that was at Claremont High School. What was the name of the band?
I didn't have a name.
For somebody who ended up being a math teacher, what had you head towards mathematics as opposed to, say, becoming a music teacher?
Well, I taught math at Citrus High School for 3 years, and then I always thought I was going to be an engineer, so I worked as an engineer for 15 months, and during those 15 months, several things made me decide to go back into teaching. One of them was on Christmas Eve, I'm used to 2 weeks vacation at Christmas. And on Christmas Eve, instead of working till 5 o'clock, they let us out at 3 o'clock. That was a big deal. And so I went back into teaching, and I applied when I was looking for a job at several high schools, and I was offered a job teaching junior high music. And I didn't think I could handle that one.
Oh, no, me
And I
neither.
was offered a job teaching in the wood shop, which I think I might have enjoyed. I was offered a job teaching physics because I had a physics minor in college. But I was offered a job at Chaffee High School teaching math, and so I grabbed that one. And I taught at Chaffee for 33 years. And the whole time I was playing, as soon as I got out of before I was in the Army, I was playing in jazz bands here and there. And then as soon as I got out of the Army, I got married. We're going to have our 75th anniversary in January.
Oh, my.
And I was playing jobs with pickup bands. I was a side man. And then George Anderson, whom you may remember, I would think so.
Yeah.
And I and Ned Brundage, and a guy named Bobby Rutherford, the piano player. The four of us played together for a long time. And once in a while, the people would have enough money, so we'd have a bass player or a trombone or both. And we started using the name Night Blooming Jazzmen in about 1955, I'm guessing.
That must have been your idea, that name.
Yeah. Well, the way it happened was the four of us went to Bobby Rutherford's house and put all the junk in the car, and we're going to go out to play a gig. And somebody said, "Man, what's that smell?" And Bobby said, "That's my Night Blooming Jazzmen." And Ned Brundage, I have to give him credit. Ned Brundage immediately said, "Man, what a name for a jazz band, Night Blooming Jazzmen." And so, of course, we spell it Jazzmen, but Jazzmen is Jasmine. Close enough.
That's a great name.
It is.
Now, you were one of the founding members of SPDJ, right?
Well, I helped organize it. Yeah, there was a joint down in Pomona called I forget what it was. Yeah, he called it Storyville.
Okay.
I don't know why. Yeah, well, I do know why, but anyway, the guy that ran it was named Bill Basin. Not Bacin, Basin. And he hired jazz bands Friday night, Saturday night, and sometimes Sunday afternoon. And he came to me one time and said, why don't you form a traditional jazz club? So he and I and 4 or 5 other people got together and started to organize the thing and put the word out that it was going to happen. So we chose the 4th Sunday because there were other jazz clubs. Well, there was only one other jazz club at that time. It was Southern California Jazz Society. They started out in the late 40s. Maybe it was 50, I don't know. But at any rate, we put the word out and people started to show up and we started to have regular meetings. And then after, we've been there for less than a year, maybe 10 months. We went over for a regular meeting. This place was all locked up. And somebody got in touch with somebody and found out Bill Basin had suddenly moved to Arizona. He was gone. And so we got on the telephone and found a place nearby. So we put a sign on the door that said, "Go over there instead today." And then we started looking for it. We were at several different places, but we met for a long time at the Elks Lodge in, I guess it was in West Covina. And then we met other places. Then we found a place where we've been for 25 years or something now, up in Duarte. No, we haven't been there that long. How long have we been there?
You're the bowling alley first, right?
Yeah, we were in the bowling alley for a long. That's where we were the longest. That's what I was trying to think of. Yeah, we were in the bowling alley in Covina, the Covina Bowl, and we met there for a long time. But then the owners of the building See, the bowling alley people didn't own the building. They were just renting it, same as we were. We were subleasing it from them, actually. And the people that owned the building gave us fair warning, about 2 years warning, that they're going to knock down the building and build something else where they own the dirt, underneath, and they want to make more money. So that's understandable. So then we tried a couple other places, and then we ended up in Duarte, and it looks really nice up in Duarte. You've been there, obviously.
Oh yeah, I like it. I like it very much.
I think that's about the only time you and I have ever been on the stage together was at a jazz club. Did you ever work at gigs together?
Well, we hadn't worked a gig together, but we ended up on stage together. I think it was in Mammoth Lakes. Remember, I kind of rushed the stage. I ended up on your We Tell Stories album.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And you called me up and said, Dan, we're putting out an album and you're on it. Is that okay? And I said, absolutely.
So in about, it was 1975. Well, in 1973, SPDJ was invited to send a band up to Sacramento for the first Sacramento Jubilee. And we already had some jobs booked, so the four of us couldn't do it. But then the same thing happened the next year. In the third year, we learned far enough ahead of time. We didn't book any jobs for that weekend. And so we went up and we had, I think I remember everybody, we had me and George Anderson, and Charlie Coulter was playing trombone. And then we had Tom Braftigan playing drums, and banjo was Tommy Hearn. And then we had playing banjo. Tommy was playing banjo.
Was George Wilson on bass yet?
What?
As it was.
And George Wilson was the original bass player.
Yeah.
And then Cliff Beard, who had worked with Rosie McHarg and other people, he was a fine piano player. But when the band was formed in October of '75, we were sitting here in my living room, this very room, and we were getting organized to go up to Sacramento the following Memorial Day. And so first thing that happened was somebody said, well, somebody has to be the leader. And they all turned and looked at me. And I said, why? I've never led a band. I've been playing with these other three guys, but nobody was the leader really. And they said, well, you're used to being up in front of people and talking. Gee, I'm used to being up in front of 25 high school kids and teaching them math. But I've never led a band. So they said, no, you're it. So I don't know if elected is exactly the word. I got hijacked into being the band leader. And I'll have to admit, I've really enjoyed it for 45 years.
Well, you do a great job. You've got that whole collection now of stories and jokes that you're famous for.
My dad and his brother, my Uncle Roy, were a vaudeville team when they were in high school in St. Louis. And my mother was a piano player for the high school chorus. That's how my mom and dad met. He was singing in the chorus and she was playing the piano. And so he and his brother were the vaudeville team, and they played banjos, tap dance, sang, and told old jokes, some of which I'm still telling. and so I really sort of had it in my genes, I guess. And I already told you about when I was born in Columbia. It was here at Jazz before I was born.
Yeah.
My dad, there was a guy named Dr. Earl Hedrick was my dad's mentor at the University of Missouri in Columbia. And so my dad taught at the university after he got his doctorate. He taught there for a 3 years. And then my mom and dad and I moved to New Orleans, where he taught at Tulane University for 3 years. And during those 3 years, Dr. Hedrick left Columbia, Missouri, and went to UCLA. And at that time, the University of California consisted of Cal, Berkeley, and UCLA. That was it. And he was a head man. His title was provost, but he was a head man at UCLA. And he heard about this job at Pomona College in Claremont. So my dad took the train out, of course. Nobody flew at that time. He took the train out and was interviewed and got the job. And so in August of 1931, we moved to Claremont. My dad took over as head of the department at Pomona College.
Just out of curiosity, how long was that train ride?
Oh, it was, you go all night and all day and all. So it took about 3 days.
Wow.
Maybe 2.5, I don't remember. So when we moved out here, we came on the train. We put the stuff we were going to bring from New Orleans out here, with like my mom's piano and the big things. Were they put them in a moving van, and the moving van started out, and then we got on the train. I had a little sister by then, and we got on the train and came out here, and I could tell you zillions of stories, but you don't want to hear them all.
I want to hear whatever you got to say, sir.
Well, yeah, I do remember. The only thing I remember about the train ride out here is we stopped someplace and we were told we could get off the train for 20 minutes. So I got off the train and I lost track of my mom and dad.
Oh, no.
And it's time they're yelling, get back on the train, all aboard, all aboard. So I got on the train, but I got on the wrong car. And they did something they certainly would not do now. They held the whole train up while they located me for about 15 minutes. They finally got me back with my mom and dad. And I still remember that. I was 6 at the time.
Wow. Where did you go?
What?
Where did they finally find you?
I was in the train already. I was in one of the cars walking up and down, trying to find my mom and dad, and finally we found each other. And so they told the train people, and they said, "Oh, good," and off we went.
Yeah, those kind of moments stay with you. I remember walking through a department store and letting go of my father's hand, and then looked up and grabbed somebody else's hand instead. And that stays with you, you know?
Well, I went all through the Claremont schools from 2nd grade through high school, and I put a band together when I was, as I said, a junior in high school.
Oh, hang on, so tell me a little bit about your school band in Claremont, the marching band and the stuff you were doing in school.
Say that again?
Tell me about the marching band at Claremont High School. At your high school.
Well, we didn't have a marching band. Claremont High School was so small. We were actually 7 through 12. We were 6-year high school.
Okay.
6, and so we didn't have a marching band.
I see you're a math teacher. That's good. Oh.
And a guy, Ward Papano, and I were the only trumpet players in school, and we were both playing football. So at halftime, we'd go over and sit on the sides in our football uniforms and play the trumpets. Then we'd go back and play football for the second half. And we had, the year I was a junior, we couldn't we played 6-man football, maybe it was 8-man, I don't know, because we couldn't field this 11-man team. But when I was a senior, we got back to playing 11-man football, but we had 14 guys on the squad. So there's 11 of us out in the field and 3 guys sitting on the bench. It was really, low class, but we had fun. We had a great time. Our arch rival was Bonita High School. And at Bonita High School, there was Glenn and Rolf Davis. And Glenn Davis was All-American at West Point for 4 years. And we were playing against them. And man, was he elusive. But I did get to tackle him once.
What was your position?
Well, we had, as I said, we had 14 guys on the squad. So I played defensive line, and I played offensive fullback.
It sounds brutal.
I carried the ball sometimes, and I blocked for the passer, and then I also tried to get in and break up the other team's plays. One time I broke my nose somewhere around the third quarter, and so they just taped it up, and I finished the game. Then I went to the doctor and got my nose set. Nobody wore face masks then. It was all of our faces were right there in the open. I don't know how I broke my nose, but somebody's knee probably. Yeah.
Now,
When I was a junior and senior in high school, my mentor, who had more influence on my life than anybody except my mom and dad, was William G. Blanchard. And he was on the Pomona College music staff. And everybody called him Doc Blanchard. They called a football player Doc Blanchard later on, but this is way ahead of that time. And Doc Blanchard was my mentor, and he got me interested in darkroom photography and let me play. He had a big band, a swing band, and they called it the Dads because some of faculty members, some just people from town. And it was a halfway decent swing band. He let me play second trumpet in that, and they made me an honorary dad. And then I played in the Pomona College marching band my last 2 years in high school. And Doc Blanchard, he was a great guy.
How did you learn to improvise? If you played the second chair in that swing band, you probably had to do the improvising.
Yeah, I had to do the stand-up solos. Yeah, and well, I don't know. I've never learned to read music very well. Never. And well, after when I turned 18, I registered for the draft, and I got called in immediately. But I applied for and got permission to finish my first semester at Pomona College. And then I also applied for a special program. They were training people to be weather officers. This was the Army Air Corps. There was no Air Force.
Right.
Army Air Corps. And so I applied and I got that. And lo and behold, I was in the Army for 3 years. And the first year I was back at Pomona College in uniform, living in the dormitory, studying stuff to be a weather officer. Well, then they found they had way too many guys in this program, way more than they ever would need. And so as soon as I finished that program, I didn't quite make the cut to go into the second year. And I was sent out in various places to work in weather stations on air bases in Idaho and Washington. And I'm a Southern California boy, so I'm up in Idaho and Washington in the winter, freezing to death. And something showed up on the weather station bulletin board. They were looking for volunteers to go to Asheville, North Carolina for some kind of special training. I signed up. I didn't even read the whole thing. So,
you knew it was going to be warmer.
Yeah, just wanted to be warmer. Wow, I was freezing. Well, actually, it turned out to be sometime in the early spring that I went to Asheville. They gave us currency. It said, here, go buy a train ticket, go to Asheville. So another guy and I said, and we put the money in our pockets and got out in the highway and hitchhiked. And we got there before the guys that rode the train to Asheville. and so I started the program. Now, I had a piece of floor, 8 by 8, and a bed and a footlocker in the attic of the YMCA. There were about, I don't know, a couple of dozen of us living up there. And the cost was $1 a night. And so I got my breakfast at a local restaurant, and I got my supper wherever I could. And but I ate my lunches. I ate a big meal at lunch out on the base. But we were done at 2:30 in the afternoon, so I started going to the USO, which is in the basement. It was a very small thing, in the basement of the Catholic Church, called the Laurentine Canteen. And so one night, there was usually a piano player there and sometimes a bass player or even a tenor sax player or something. So I'd take my horn over and we'd jam for a little while and then turn on the jukebox and everybody would dance. So somebody came up and said she wanted to hear a certain song. And I said, well, I've heard it, but I don't really know it. She said, here's the sheet music, and handed me the sheet music. So I'm a bad reader to start with. I'm trying to transpose sheet music and play my trumpet. And so this beautiful young hostess came up and held the music for me in front of my face. So what could I do? I married her. That's how we met. We spent the rest of the evening dancing and talking. And then Eileen broke broke one of the rules. They were not supposed to date the guys they met at the USO. But the next afternoon, we went to a movie. I went to her house for dinner. She had a sister, and her mom and dad were there, of course. And so the rest of the time I was there, which was about another 5 weeks, my routine was I'd go out to school in the morning, do my thing, come home, eat some supper someplace, maybe. Sometimes I go to Aunt A's house for supper. And we just knew right away. And so about a week or 10 days after we met, we said, when the war is over, we're going to get married, which we did. So
It's a special woman to be married to a musician.
yeah, well, you know, we met when I was playing the trumpet when she married. When she met me, I was playing the horn. She knew what I was getting into, and she's a musician too. She's a pretty good piano player. She got too much arthritis in her hands now, but she was a pretty good piano player, and she played the soprano sax in high school, and so we just got along fine. And you know, we were both Christians. Now she was raised a Methodist, and I was raised a Congregationalist. So when we got married, we compromised on Presbyterian.
I've got to tell you, when I was walking my wife down the aisle for our wedding, I literally stopped her halfway down the aisle and said, "You realize you're marrying a musician?" She said, "Yes, I know." I said, "Okay, then, no excuses." And we went on with the wedding.
We got married on a Sunday morning right after church, and I'm still in my dress uniform because it's the only clothes I had. And she was in just a nice suit. She didn't have a bridal gown or anything, just a nice suit. And so right after the service, the minister said, well, everybody in the church knew Eileen, of course. And so after the minister said, now Eileen is going to marry a guy from California if you want to stick around for the wedding. And everybody stayed around, so we had a big crowd at our wedding. The only sort of interesting thing that happened at the wedding, it was time for me to put the ring on her finger. She puts her hand out, and I'm trying to put the ring on her finger. She's pulling her hand back. I thought, oh, good Lord, she changed her mind. She had put her right hand out instead of her left hand. And so she got her hand back and put her left hand. That was the only sort of glitch in the wedding. And we bought a beat up, I will have to say, this was in 1946, you see.
Yeah.
Early January 46. We bought a beat up 1938 Chevrolet sedan and drove it out here. And it made it, but just barely. It was a mess. God has been good to us, I'll tell you, Dan. We by the time we were 30, we had 5 kids. I was teaching. We'd bought a house here in Claremont. And after we lived in that house for 14 years, it was getting sort of crowded. And so we started looking, we found this lot where we are right now. And in 1964, we built this house that we're sitting in the living. You've been here.
Yeah, I played one of the backyard 4th of July things, I think, once.
Yeah, well, it was in the summer. It wasn't 4th of July.
Oh, okay, it was something.
Yeah, and yeah, right. And so we built this house. We started out 3,800 square feet. Now it's right around 4,000. We had a couple of additions. And I did all the plumbing and the wiring. And everybody in the family helped. Eileen nailed on the roof. And we hired one man that had been a contractor in Indiana. And he came out here for reasons which are not interesting to anybody. And so we hired him. I think we paid him $1.50 an hour, which in 1964 was okay. And he knew all about concrete and framing. And I would measure something real carefully and figure out the cuts for the rather strange pieces that are up, under the roof, especially where the house turned the corner. And he would just stand on the ground and look at it and eyeball it and go and cut them and get them exactly right.
So you did all the plumbing yourself?
I did all the plumbing. Well, I didn't do the drain lines. I had a plumber friend that did the cast iron drain lines under the house. But I did all the copper tubing, and I did all the electric work. And when we got to move in, we turned on the water, and we only had one leak. and that was in the wall behind the washing machine. And there was an elbow which had a pinhole in the elbow. It wasn't my fault.
Okay.
And then when we turned on the electricity, everything worked fine except one circuit. And I traced it to where the problem was. And, you put the two wires in and twist the thing on. And I had twisted it too hard and broke the ground wire. So I trimmed it off, put a new one on, and haven't had any problem with electricity since. And when we enlarged the house, I had to tie it to I put in 3 new circuits since we built the house to accommodate the extra wiring. Oh, and one of the circuits is just for the swimming pool. We didn't build the swimming pool. We didn't build the fireplace. So we hired a man who had built a fireplace for us down in the South Claremont. And so we got the same guy, and his name was Earl Smith, but not the one you know.
Okay.
And he did a beautiful job on the fireplace. And we also hired a plasterer to do the stuccoing on the outside. That's an art. I think the plasterer should make more than the electrician and the plumbers, but they don't. But that is an art, I'll tell you.
I know it's a real art when I get plastered. So.
Alcoholic to drink was when I was over in China during the war. I was stationed in a wilderness weather station on a dirt emergency landing strip out in the middle of nowhere in China. And the only communication we had with the outside world was a bug. We didn't have a voice con. We just, like Morse code with a bug. And so we could talk to the people at the big weather station down in Kunming, China, which is a huge base, the other end of the Burma Road. And so they would drop bags of stuff down to us once in a while, and we would. They dropped cigarettes. Well, there were 3 of us there. We were the whole thing. Nobody else. And the only reason there were 3 of us, they've told us, so we'd have somebody to talk to. There were little Chinese villages around, but nobody spoke English.
So did you learn Chinese?
I learned a little bit, very little, and I forgot most of what I learned. But my buddy Al Schaffler was a natural linguist. He picked up Mandarin Chinese, and there was a big Catholic mission in town about 7 miles away. We'd walk in there about twice a month and have dinner with them. And most of the time we were just cooking for ourselves and buying stuff in the village nearby.
But you didn't have to live on sea rations.
No, we had real food. And a lot of guys that were over in China, they said, when I get home, I'm never going to eat rice again. I like rice. I still like rice. And so we had a lot of rice, and there was a cornfield right behind us. And so we found the farmer and made a deal with him. We just paid him whatever he asked, because we ate corn, and then there were guys would drift through and sell us like lima beans, and we were very short on fruit, but we had plenty of vegetables and plenty of meat, chicken. Mostly we ate chicken, but at any rate, they dropped cigarettes. Well, Schaffler smoked. The other 2 of us didn't. And so we would take the extra cigarettes that he didn't need into town and sell them for Chinese money. So we were up there I was there. The other 2 guys were there before I got there, but I was there for 10 months. And when the war was over, well, the first thing that happened, they sent us a message on our bug telling us, get ready, you're going home. Pack up your stuff. Destroy the stuff at the weather station. Destroy the Jeep. Because the communist Chinese were coming in, And so we tapped back and said, why are we going home? And they said, because the war was over 2 weeks ago. Nobody told us. We're still sending in the weather reports.
How do you destroy a Jeep?
Well, that's interesting. It was already pretty well destroyed. We ran out of gasoline. but we had aviation ethyl available. If a plane came in and had an emergency, we had 55-gallon drums of aviation ethyl, like 140 octane or something.
Yeah, that's real high test.
That's how we destroyed the Jeep. We put the stuff in the Jeep and blew the engine up.
Oh, let's talk about some of the musicians you've had come through the Night Blooming Jazzmen. You've had some wonderful musicians with your band.
We have. And you know, the band's 45 years old last month. And we have had very few changes compared to a lot of bands. Our original piano player was Cliff Beard, and he and Tommy Hearn were both 82 when the band was formed, and he had to drop out because of health problems. So then we got Maury Huff, and he was with us for a long time. And then we got Paul Reed. He was with me for a long time.
Paul was with you when I met you.
Yeah, Paul was a great entertainer, but he is sometimes, to be honest, a little hard to get along with. But we put up with him.
Crazy man.
He put up with us. I could tell you several Paul Reed stories, but that's not of interest. And then we got Les Deutsch. That's it for piano players.
I've interviewed Les.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we had George Olson was our original bass player. And then when he got Parkinson's, we got for about 4 or 5 years, we had Don Richardson. And then he has health problems. So then we got Mike Earls. That's all the bass players we've ever had.
Mike's wonderful.
He's good, yeah. And I'm the only cornet player we ever had. And we had Charlie Coulter, and then Dick Doder was with me for 35 years.
Phenomenal guy.
Oh, yeah. One time, somebody wrote up one of the festivals, and they said that Dick Doner was the best jazz singer on the circuit. Well, I would agree to that. So I announced this from the stage 2 or 3 times. And Dick said, "Don't do that anymore. You're embarrassing me." So I never did it again. But he was a great singer and a more than passable trombone player. And God, he had an ear, I'll tell you. He could hear exactly. And we worked together for such a long time that we would listen to the other guy, of course, and pick up little licks. And then the second time we played the lick, the other guy would back him up with the same lick. And we just worked together so well. And then, so that was it for trombone players. And then when Dick had to drop out, we're very fortunate to get Phil Andreen. I've known him since he was an undergraduate in the college down here. And then reed players. We started out with George Anderson. Then we briefly had a crazy lady whose name won't come to me. She was only with us for about a year and a half. One time we went up to Three Rivers, and her name got left out of the program.
Oh, no.
So she quit the band. Well, played the first set, found out her name wasn't in the program, packed up and went home. And which was good riddance, really. Then we got Peter Mayers, and he was with us for, I don't know,
A long time.
15, 20 years.
How did you meet Peter?
What?
How did you meet Peter Mayer? How did you meet Peter Mayer?
Oh, okay. He somehow heard about this lady walking out on us. And I use the same term lady loosely. And so he called me up and he says, in his Dutch accent, "I hear you're looking for a clarinet player." And I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, I would be interested." I said, "Well, we don't have one, and we're going to play in some Masonic temple or something Sunday afternoon. If you want to come sit in with us, and we'll find out if we like each other." Well, it took me about 2 or 3 tunes and I realized this was very good. And yeah, so he and Alita joined us, and then Tommy Hearn died, and Alita took over the banjo spot for a while.
Yeah.
And they both left the band. I won't tell you about that. by mutual agreement.
Oh, it's okay.
Hmm?
I said, oh, that's okay. I don't need to know.
Yeah, and then Jimmy Richardson's been with me for close to 20 years now, and so is Les. And so we haven't had a great turnover. Oh, Brad Roth was with me for 19 years.
Yeah, wow.
Long
I didn't realize it.
with any group.
I was just saying, I didn't realize it had been that long.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he when he joined the band, his daughter Noelle was an infant in arms, and by the time he left the band, she's into college.
Right. And singing and dancing.
Yeah, and Brad thought for a long time before he told me, I'm going to have to drop out of the band. I just got too many other things going, not just music, but all kinds of things in my church. He's very active in his church, you know. And so he says, I'm going to have to drop out of the band, but he told me plenty of time. So we started looking, and we got Mike Olson, of course.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of interesting that Mike took that chair, seeing how his history with his dad in your band, you know?
Yeah. Mike, when I asked him if he would join us and be the permanent banjo player, and he said, well, I'm no Brad Roth, you know. I said, I know, but but you're very competent and you're fun, and we'd like to have you. And see, so well, said, nobody's a Brad Roth on the banjo.
That's exactly what I was going to say. There isn't another one, you know.
There's some guy that I see on TV every once in a while. They're supposed to, they just rave about his banjo playing. He didn't come close to Brad. I can't think of his name, but I see him every once in a while on TV, and he's good. You know Brad Roth, I'll tell you. Yeah, Brad is just we know Brad started playing professionally with Big Tiny Little.
Oh yeah, his first album was Big Tiny Little.
Yeah. When he was like 10 years old or something, right? 11 or 12 maybe, I don't know.
Something you probably don't know, I actually played on Big Tiny Little's last two albums.
Oh, did you?
So kind of bookends, you know?
Yeah, you know, I've never had any work with really super big name professional jazz bands. I've been on the stage with Big Tiny Little, sitting in with his band. His trumpet player and I one time were good friends, and I sat in with him for 2 or 3 years in a row up in Sacramento.
He was a fun guy to be around, actually.
Say it again.
I said Big Tiny was a fun guy to be around. He had stories.
Yeah, I see him on the. We've got 70 Lawrence Welk shows on a recording box here, and Big Tiny was with Lawrence Welk for a while, and then Lawrence Welk got
Joanne Castle. Yeah,
Joanne Castle, and Big Tiny and Joanne were in the band together for a while. They played some duets. I'll tell you, they just tore the place up.
Yeah, Big Tiny told me that when Joanne joined the band, she only knew one song, but she had such a personality that Lawrence hired her. So,
yeah, one of the shows, she's wearing I can't remember what you call it, some extra hair that's not really hers down her back, and Lawrence Welk go over and teasing her, and this thing comes off in his head. He stands, and the camera zooms in on his face, and he's just looking sort of dumbfounded. And then she was interviewed after one of the shows, and she said, when that happened, Lawrence came to me after the show, and he said, "Could we do that again?"
That's funny. You've got to have some great stories from some of the jazz. Oh, I got a question for you. Who started the Sunday morning gospel sets? Okay,
first year in Sacramento that we played, they had nothing on Sunday morning. They also, it's Memorial Day weekend. They had nothing patriotic. So when I got home, I called up The guy that was the head man.
Was that Roger?
No, before Roger.
Okay.
Can't think of his name. He was a trumpet player, sort of. He wasn't very good, but he was great organizer. I called him up and I said, how about having a Sunday morning something out in that big open air parking lot what they used to use.
Right.
And we'd like to play it. He said, well, let me talk to the committee. And he called me back a week or so later and said, yeah, we'd like to do that. And we'd like to have two bands to alternate. I said, fine. And so we did that the first time out in the big parking lot. And the second time, and everybody wanted to do it. Not everybody, but a whole bunch of bands wanted to do it. So we had our first hymn sing in the garage of one of the hotels, the Mansion Inn. We were in the garage of the Mansion Inn, and we did our first hymn sing there. And I just had the words printed out on some sheets we handed out. Then after a couple of years of that, we made some little booklets, which my mom and I stapled together. And then we got a real printer to print the nice books we've been using ever since. But we started that, so it would have been, let's see, the first time in Sacramento was 76, 77, 78. So it would have been 1979 we did our first hymn sing. And we've been doing them ever since. We've done them at hundreds of festivals.
Yeah, well, I used to go see those because, like you said, pretty often nothing else was happening on Sunday morning, and I enjoyed the band so much anyway. And I just go so I can memorize your stories. You know.
Yeah. Well, as I told you, my dad and his brother were a vaudeville team. This would have been in the early teens.
What were they called?
They were called the Jaeger brothers.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
Actually, the first year they worked, my uncle's voice hadn't changed. So it was a brother and sister act. He came out and dragged.
Oh, my.
And then his voice changed and they were a brother act. And they were just the Jaeger brothers. Jaeger's a big name in St. Louis. There's more Jaegers than Smiths or Josephs or anybody else. And my dad and my Uncle Roy used to keep the family in stitches telling us stories. And so some of the stories I tell, I got from them. And I don't know if you have ever noticed this, but I stay away from stories about drunks. I don't think drunks are funny. And some people do. But there is one, which I have told a couple of times, it was just the right audience, about there's two nuns in full habit walking down the sidewalk next to each other. And here comes a guy staggering toward them, and he's obviously smashed. So they went to one side of the sidewalk, and he went to the same side of the walk. They went to the other side, he went to this. So they split. And the guy staggered right between him. And he stopped and turned around and looked at him and said, how did she do that? So that's one of my dad's stories.
Oh, I like it. You know, speaking of alcohol, I was talking to one of my other musician friends months ago now, but I was saying, isn't it funny how it's changed that you used to walk into a Dixieland gig and everybody would have a beer in their stands, and you know they'd have little holders to hold their beer cans and things. And nowadays, you walk up to them and everybody's got a Diet Coke.
Yeah, hardly. I haven't seen anybody get drunk for a long time, which is fine with me.
Oh, yeah.
The first alcohol I ever had was when I was at this wilderness weather station in China. The three of us used to walk into town and go to the Catholic mission so we could have somebody else to talk to for an evening. And the fathers there and the sisters, the nuns, a lot of them spoke English. And so we'd have a very pleasant evening, and they'd always give us a couple of bottles of wine and a couple of loaves of bread and some cheese to take back to our place, which we would enjoy thoroughly. But that's the first time I've ever had anything alcoholic. The first time I went out there, they could see us coming from a half a mile away, and we're arriving in the afternoon, you know. So we went into the kitchen and sat down around the table, and they just gave us each a glass of wine. They gave me a glass of it was some kind of white wine. I don't know what it was. Chablis, probably. So I'd never had anything alcoholic in my life. So, and I'm by this time 20 years old. So I started sipping on this, and pretty soon I felt sort of weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got a buzz on, So I told them, gentlemen, I never drink anything alcoholic, so I don't think I better finish this. And they said, oh, we understand, and they took it away. So after that, when I went out there, they gave me a little tiny glass of wine.
No, I partook a little bit in college, like a lot of people do, but I'm too much of a control freak to. I don't like the feeling of not being in control.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Yeah, I have drunk enough to get a buzz on. I think 3 or maybe 4 times in my life. That was one of them. And then one of them, I went to a party. You remember a guy named John Beals that played the clarinet?
No, I don't.
He was one of the founding fathers of SPDJ. And we went to a Sunday afternoon party at John's house, and he handed me a glass of red wine. And I was used to drinking a glass dry wine. I never drank anything sweet. And I started sipping this red wine, and it's sort of weird taste. What is this stuff? Turned out to be port, which has twice the alcohol of any dry wine,
Like porterhouse.
I felt the buzz, so I went and I found an empty bed in an empty bedroom and lay down for about an hour till it went away.
Now, we've been doing CJ and a bunch of us have been doing little concerts for the SPDJ website.
Yeah.
And that's been a lot of fun. It's been nice to be able to play once a month at least.
Yeah. Boy, I wish I could. Well, I sit right where I am now. Here it is. Every afternoon I play my horn for an hour just to keep the chops up.
Good for you. It's kind of hard to do that with a sousaphone. Especially, I live in a house with my daughter and her 2 kids, along with my wife. So, yeah, that doesn't happen.
Well, I started to tell you when I was over there in this wilderness weather station in China, I had my horn with me. I had a trumpet, not the cornet, and I didn't have any printed music. But my mom and dad were both musicians, as I've told you, and I had a whole bunch of songs from the 20s and 30s in my head. And of course, when I was in high school, the big bands were great, and I had a bunch of songs that I had heard them play. And so I just sat there in my room and played my trumpet every day, probably a couple of hours, partly to keep the chops up. But then I just played songs I had in my head. I didn't have any music to look at. So I actually got pretty good at it, and I've kept working at it all these years, and now I'm comfortable at anything from C to 5 flats. I'm still sort of wobbly in G and 6 flats.
Yeah, or the sharps, huh?
Yeah. If I try to, just for here in my living room where nobody's going to hear me much, I sometimes try to play something in E. Forget it.
Oh, it's hard. It's hard. I only learned how to do that because I played a lot with Latin bands when I was in college. And of course, all their stuff is in guitar keys, which is all those sharps.
Yeah, a lot of A.
Yeah. Hey. Oh.
One time, there used to be a guy around whose name is Bob something or other, played tenor sax, and he called me up, and this had to be 50 years ago by now. And he called me up and says, I got a gig with a country western band, but they want to play the occasional Dixieland tune, so they want you to come play. And we discussed where it was and what it was going to pay and so forth. So I showed up. So mostly I'm just sitting there, but every once in a while they call a tune and we play some, not really Dixieland tune, but old Tin Pan Alley tunes were played from the 20s. And so I was going all right. So the guy says, the leader says, Chet, what would you like to play? I said, well, I'd like to just play some blues in B flat. He didn't hear the word flat.
Oh, no.
It's the only time in my life I've ever played in front of an audience in the key of B.
Just push all your slides in and hope for the best. So tell me, did you have a favorite big band from the 40s?
Well, yes, Bob Crosby.
Okay.
He
Bobcat.
had he had the Bobcats, you know, and he had some great musicians. Yank Lawson was the trumpet player, and I got to know him a little bit. And Eddie Miller didn't play a zillion notes. He played beautiful stuff. Everything he played was well thought out and beautiful. One time, when my wife and I and our kids were in New Orleans, you know, much later, here comes a guy walking down the street toward me at about midnight. And I stopped and I turned around and said, "Eddie Miller?" He turns around and says, "Yes." It was Eddie Miller. He'd been playing a gig someplace, and I was just going to try to find some jazz. So we stood on the sidewalk there and chatted for a while. I told him he was my favorite tenor sax player because he played music. He just didn't play a whole bunch of notes. He didn't try to show off his technique. He just played beautiful stuff. Yeah, I liked them. And I got to hear live, you know, Tommy Dorsey more than once. And never got to hear live Benny Goodman. Bob Crosby often. And, oh, gosh.
I always thought that the Claude Thornhill band was underrated.
I didn't have much to compare it to. Yeah, there was somebody that made a great recording of the Elks Parade. I can't remember the name of the band. And I heard them one time live, and they played the Elks Parade and knocked my socks off. And Willie Martinez played clarinet with me for about 3 years. I forgot to mention him. And he was 60-something. He says, "I'm too old for this. I got to quit." 60? Come on.
That's 5 years younger than me.
Yeah. But Willie Martinez worked with this band that played the Elks Parade, and he had a solo in it. And he didn't have the recording, and I had 2 copies, so I gave him one. Yeah.
I got another question for you.
Okay.
What is your least favorite Dixie tune?
My least favorite?
Yeah.
Oh.
What would you rather not call?
Well, some of the ones that have like several different parts, if I'm with my own band, I'll call them. But I would not like to play Panama, for example, because it's got several different phrases which are similar but not exactly the same, and different bands play them in different orders. And so if you try to call this an SPDJ, it's a mess.
Yeah, I understand. Well, Wolverine, those kind of tunes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we play Wolverine, but there again, if we play it at SPDJ, I just tell the guys, well, follow me. And I would try to give them obvious leads into the key changes and so forth. Yeah, I have, I think I can safely say that I am one of the better 96-year-old jazz cornet players.
You're the best I know.
I think I'm the only one. There may be others, but I don't know.
I don't know. You know, I don't know exactly how old, but I've interviewed Bob Schultz and a few people that are close.
Oh, Schultz is near as old. You mean from Frisco?
Yes.
That's Schultz. Yeah, he's probably at least 15 years younger than I am.
Okay. I tried to interview Leon Oakley, and he declined. But
who?
Well, Leon Oakley.
Oh, Oakley. He's sort of a standoffish guy. Good player, great player.
Yeah, I've had a few musicians that I've asked to interview that I've declined. And I realize that it has to do with being a musician. A lot of people use music as their only form of expression that they're comfortable with. And that's why they were musicians. You know, guys like you and I who did some teaching in front of people, we're okay. We're pretty comfortable with talking. But
I got to tell you one more thing about when I was over in China and the war was over. We were there for about another week and had nothing to do. They told us, destroy the weather station, don't send any more reports on, but keep your telegraph key open, so we'll tell you when we're going to come get you and you'll be ready. So we walked into town and I got word somehow that Chiang Kai-shek was there and the madam, and they're on their way. They didn't say this, but it was obvious they're abandoning ship and go to Taiwan, which used to be Formosa.
Right.
And so we found out where they were staying. And we knocked on the door, and an officer came to the door, Chinese officer who spoke English very well. We said we would like to meet the Generalissimo and the madam, and we identified ourselves, and we're in uniform. He said, "Well, just a minute," and he came back. He said, "Could you come back tomorrow at the same time?" I said, "Sure, we could." So we did. So we went in, and we're ushered into a little parlor, I guess you'd call it. There's a tea table and some chairs, and we sat down, and then in comes the Generalissimo and the madam, and we chatted with them for about 20 minutes.
What do they chat about?
Well, we were told, don't chat about the war, talk about the weather, sports, anything else. So we talked about food. We found, and the Generalissimo speaks about as much English as I speak Chinese. But the madam, of course, is a Vassar graduate, speaks English perfectly. And so Al, my buddy, could speak Mandarin, so he could talk to either of them, and she could talk to either us. But the Generalissimo and I couldn't talk to each other. And we tried to struggle and say something directly, and we ended up just laughing. We couldn't do it.
He sounds like he was an okay guy.
Yeah. So I think we were probably the only guys over there that met the Generalissimo and the madam. And then they had when the war was officially over, they had a great big celebration on a stage about, must have been 100 feet wide. And up on the stage, there's governors of the province, the mayors of the towns, all kinds of, the Generalissimo is blowing by now, but there were all kinds of army officers from the Chinese Loyalist Army, and right in the middle was representing the United States of America, or Sergeant Schauffer and Corporal Jaeger. I've got an 8x10 of this, which I prize highly. So I had some interesting experiences over there.
Wow. When I was kind of looking up some information on you, I was surprised by the fact that you've been in Claremont you've been in that general area for a very long time, thinking that maybe you've not been a whole lot of other places. But the fact that
Well, of course, during the period when Peter and Alita were with us, she took the band on all kinds of trips to Europe and other cruises.
Yeah.
And then when we parted company with them, we went with different travel agents, and we went back to different parts of Europe. And then the last two times we went to Europe, we went to Bavaria, the very southern. I had to tell people we were in Bavaria. It's the southern part of Germany where they say "Auf Wiedersehen, y'all." And we could walk across the river and be in Austria.
You can get schnitzel and grits.
Right. And so anyway, we went there twice, and we were there for 2 weeks. And instead of on all of Alita's trips, get up in the morning, get on a bus to go sightseeing, come back to the hotel, play for the people, get 4 or 5 hours of sleep, repeat. On these last two trips to Bavaria, we got up, had a wonderful breakfast, went sightseeing, came back to the hotel. We stayed in the same hotel for 2 weeks. Eileen and I got the bridal suite. And then we would play for our people that were traveling with us as long as we wanted them to. And sometimes it was a half an hour, sometimes it was 2 hours. And it was just a wonderful trip. The sightseeing was so well organized. And this is a guy named Tom Crisp, who has a horse ranch in Arizona someplace. But he organized these. Tom had been in the army, and he was stationed in Germany, and he married a German girl. And so she and he live in Arizona now. But she went on these trips with us. And being a German girl, by this time she's 40 or 45 or something, but boy, she was really helpful sometimes when we needed to find out how to do something or what not to do. Sometimes it was a good idea. Yeah. So those were great trips. Yeah. It's been a great life, Dan, but it's sure winding down. I don't know if the Night Bloomings are ever going to play again. I hope they do, but.
Well, I hope that we get a chance to run into each other at SBDJ in the near future. Hopefully this whole thing's got to stop sometime, and we'll get a chance to crawl on that stage again together.
Well, the expert says that the virus is going to go away anything from 3 months to 3 years. They don't know when it's going to go away. They don't know any more than I do.
No. What can I say? Well, thank you for doing this show. I'm gonna go ahead and wrap us up here. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Oh, I think I've said enough. I taught high school math for 36 years, and I enjoyed about 95% of it. There was the occasional rotten kid that I had a problem with, but I pretty much solved all my own discipline problems, and I had very few. I think it was partly because I was big. I've lost 25 pounds in the last 3 or 4 years. But for most of my adult life, I weighed 205 and I was 6'2", and that helps take care of the naughty kids in high school.
I can't hear you either. So we're going to go ahead and sign off.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much. I think the world of you, sir.
Try to watch tomorrow afternoon. Dawn's going to set it up for me.
All right. Well, thank you, Don.
I can't hear you. You're silent.
Thank you for watching Trad Jazz today. Dan shows new interviews every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Make sure to check out the archive of past shows, and please give us a thumbs up when you subscribe to the channel. Bye.